Hey everybody, welcome to the Revenue Growth Fast Frame of the Week. I'm here with Dave Ratner, and Dave's the former CEO of Realm, who's an open source database provider, now an advisor to both public and private boards on the topics of strategy, implementation, and execution, specifically in the role of the CEO. So Dave, always great to see you. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks, Matt.
I've got two big questions. So question number one is, what advice would you give to a board member who's getting ready to hire a CEO for a turnaround?
You know, Matt, it's a good question. The first thing that a board member needs to understand is that their view of what needs to change may not be exactly what needs to change. They see symptoms, they're not deep in the organization, they don't necessarily understand what the true root cause is. My opinion, you need to make sure you get a CEO who has enough experience across the organizations that they can put the pieces of the puzzle together. You need to find a problem solver CEO. You can't sit there and say, well, sales is lagging, so therefore I need to get a sales CEO, right? You need to understand that the problems are generally intra-related across the various different organizations. There's generally multiple symptoms and oftentimes multiple root causes that address people and process and product and organization and structure and go-to-market. And you need to make sure that you get someone who's good at problem solving, number one. You need to make sure you get someone who can identify what I'm going to do now and what I'm going to do later, and is really good at prioritizing.
Yep.
And you need to get someone who has a backbone, who can sit there and say, I hear you on point X, but this is why we're going to do Y and Z first, and make sure that you get a CEO who is comfortable with that.
Very good. Okay, so the follow-up question then, to your peers on the other side who are getting hired as a CEO, what's your advice to them walking into the turnaround?
First, realize that the situation is always going to be slightly different and generally a little bit uglier than you thought it was when you joined. You're gonna, spend your first couple weeks peeling back the onion and saying, oh my God, I didn't realize this, I didn't realize that. And you're going to go through some periods of a little bit of, what the heck have I gotten myself into?
Sure, that's a fair point.
It's natural, it's expected, it's always worse than you think it is in some degree.
Sure.
And so just recognize that that's going to happen,
Okay,
number one.
that's good.
Number two, make sure that you have alignment with the board that there's enough financial runway or enough time in some measurement in order to implement realistic change, right? Change takes, 90 plus days in order to figure out what you're going to go do, and it takes time to then implement, and it takes time for that to be reflected in revenue growth or whatever metric the board is going to be looking at to prove that you've turned it around, right? If the board is giving you 6 months to prove it, that's probably not going to be enough time for it to be all the way visible on the other side and it be experiencing significant revenue growth from that.
Got it.
And so make sure that from a financial perspective, from an investment perspective, make sure that the board is giving you the resources and the time that you need in order to demonstrate that.
All right, there you go. Some great advice from a guy who's been in the trenches and emerged the other side with a high degree of success executing turnarounds as a CEO. As always, I wish you good luck as you try and make your number. Great stuff.